Ding. Hey, if you're a Toastmaster, you got that joke. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist podcast. I'm your host, Donald Kelly, the Sales Evangelist, and I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you. We have a great guest on the show today. His name is Jim Kokocki. Jim is actually the Toastmaster International President. Well, when the episode was recorded, he was the president-elect, and now he is the president of Toastmaster International for this upcoming year. If you're familiar with Toastmasters, it's a great opportunity for you to practice. If you're not familiar with Toastmasters, it's still a great opportunity for you to practice. The dues are ridiculously cheap, and you get to learn how to speak in a public situation. Most salespeople, you can refine your skill. I go ahead and sometimes I give presentations that help refine my sales presentations. And it's great to get feedback and get insights on how I can perform so much better. So check Toastmasters out. We'll have a link in our show notes. But before we dive into that, ladies and gentlemen, I got to give some shout out this week. And today, my great friend, Jeremy Isaac, I want to give you a birthday wish. Congratulations on another year and happy birthday. Excited to celebrate with you. I'm glad you're a friend and grateful for all the things you've taught me over the years. So happy birthday, brother. Also want to give a big shout out to Caitlin. Thank you so much. Keep hustling out there in Utah. It's great to connect with you. Look forward to hearing from you and all the great things that you're doing. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can go ahead and find me on Twitter, Donald C. Kelly. You can find me on LinkedIn, Donald C. Kelly, or you can go ahead and find us on Facebook. The Sales Evangelist is our Facebook page. You can get behind the scenes information, all the good stuff going on back here. Or you can go ahead and join our private Facebook group. It's a community for sellers, for entrepreneurs, people just like you and me who are out there hustling and bustling. You can learn to improve on your craft of selling. You can build strategic alliances, form new partnerships, and just be able to learn from other sellers like yourself. And we all say that, always hear that iron sharpen iron. So join the community and start learning and growing. Now, we have a great guest on the show today. Let's go ahead and dive into our episode. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Hello, Donald. Glad to be here with you.
I'm so excited to have you. I mean, I've been bragging about you, talking to people about what we're doing here and how this is going to be a great episode. I know you are an awesome individual to have. Not only do you have a history of sales and marketing with telecom companies and large organizations, you are the president-elect of Toastmaster International, a real estate investor, and also someone dabbling in the startup world. So I know you're going to bring tons of value to our audience today, and we're excited to have you. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
Now, Jim, before we get started on all the fun stuff, one of the questions I ask all my guests is for them to tell me about their coolest sales experience when they were the customer.
Well, that's funny. I remember one experience particularly well, and it was really a lesson in the discipline of asking for the sale. And I had a TV remote control that failed, so I went to one of the local electronic stores and bought a replacement device which cost $10. And when I was checking out, I was just so impressed. The salesperson said, look, if that breaks, that's going to cost you another $10. So would you be willing to pay another, I think it was 15% of the purchase price for a 2-year warranty. And that was hilarious, I thought at the time, but it was just, I so admired the discipline of asking for the sale.
And isn't that so cool? Like sometimes it's the simple stuff that we overlook. And they usually have the most powerful impact.
Absolutely. I really admired that.
So I gave a little bit of an introduction to you and, about what you do and, president-elect of Toastmaster and this, real estate investor as well as someone who's dabbling into the startup world. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Sure. So I spent 30 years with a telecom company here in Canada called Bell Aligned NBTel. I spent about 10 years in the computer field in the sales, in the systems development side. Then I spent about 4 years in sales and the remainder years in marketing. And in the marketing world, I was responsible for the business market. So we had I had responsibility for the largest customers, enterprise customers, the small, medium enterprises, and the medium-sized market, and about 11 people reporting to me at the time to make sure we had solid coverage and were delivering all we could for that segment of the market.
So you had a great opportunity to experience not only from you saw all facets of the business, first of all, the technology side, the engineer side, to the sales marketing side of the organization as well. And you come with the experience of working with sales professionals and being able to see some of the challenges that they had and being able to give some advice on that.
Absolutely.
Now, as we go into the episode today, Jim, one of the things we want to talk about, and if we go into different areas, audience, I mean, this is going to be an awesome episode, so I'm just excited to pick Jim's brain. But, how sales professionals and entrepreneurs can better market ourselves and to maybe some of the challenges that we face and we can overcome. But in your experience working with entrepreneurs and salespeople, what would you say some of the major challenges that hold them back from truly marketing themselves as they should?
I think one of the major opportunities is ensuring you're being clear in your message about who you're serving and what your service is. This depends on what you are happen to be selling or marketing, but it's been interesting. You mentioned in the intro that I've been dabbling in the startup field, and I'll relate a story as I've been working on startup ideas and opportunities to bring to market. I've learned as I describe what my vision is, people interpret it and they feed it back to me differently. And initially, I was a little frustrated with that, thinking, "Gee, they're not getting my idea." But what I've learned through that process is that they are getting the idea and interpreting it in a way that's meaningful to them and they'd be willing to pay money for. So I think in a similar way, any entrepreneur needs to, in the initial stages and as they continue to evolve, to listen to how people interpret your product or service, because when they're doing that, they're thinking about your product and service and interpreting it in a way to answer the question for themselves, why would I pay money for this?
That's very interesting. How could you best, I guess, as an individual entrepreneur, how could you, I would say, best capitalize on that from the very get-go? I mean, if I was creating a startup today and trying to, figure out, what to do, should I go with that approach and should I have certain questions that I should ask people, or should I do an MVP, like the minimal viable product, to test things out and have people play with stuff, or, just curious based on your experience so far?
I'd say all of the above, but especially before in the startup world and within the business world in general, before you commit major funds, you need to determine, what's going to trigger people to spend money. Why are they going to see value in this? So I think the best approach is to start talking early to folks about your business concept. Get their feedback and interpretations. As you're aware, Donald, initial views of what a business might look like, they're usually going to take some pivoting. So if you can do that verbally, and if you can get some different perspectives from some prospective customers or some colleagues in the industry or adjacent to the industry, that's awfully helpful in avoiding wasting money. Yeah,
I agree with you. There are tons. I've seen different approaches where people just jump into something. It's like the what do you call that? The Field of Dreams. Is that the movie where you build it, they will come? They go out and they build what they think is needed, as opposed to getting that reaction or understanding from what the audience truly want, or what the market truly begs for, to validate their ideas. Now. And so understanding your customer, understanding their needs and value, how do you best now, I had a conversation with a gentleman today, in your view, how do you best share that value? I mean, you've worked a lot as a sales manager and with sales teams. How do you encourage sellers to better sell value and not price?
I think it's extremely important to articulate what that value proposition is. So this is a marketing discipline, and depending on the maturity of the sales force, they can respond well to customer objections. But it is critical in a marketing arm very clearly articulate, what is the value proposition, how are you differentiated from competitors, and to stick to that. So that does require a lot of discipline, and it's important to document that for any sales staff.
I think one of the things I like you said was the idea of documenting it, being able to document that. So many times, it really bothers me and frustrates me when I work with sales individuals, and it's just kind of willy-nilly. It's just kind of shoot from the hip. We're going to do this today, and this is what's going to happen. But we know there's a scientific method behind it, in a sense. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely. Zig Ziglar wrote about that many, many years ago. There's absolutely a scientific method of probing for customer needs, determining if there's a match with the customer, and customers respect if there's not a strong match to professionally walk away. But there is a discipline to determining if you've got a match with the customer and offering the product for sale.
So true with that. It's and it goes back to what you also talked about at the beginning, where you have to be willing to take that action. And where in your example, you got to be willing to open your mouth and to ask for the sale.
Absolutely.
There's a key part to that. Well, one of the other things I wanted to learn about, Jim, were what are some of the major challenges you saw that sellers have when they're trying to sell in a B2B world?
Well, I think one of the challenges that people have, salespeople have, is the strongest people, salespeople believe in a product and in their proposition, and they present from a position of confidence. Once things start to go a little bit bad, then people get rattled by competitive offers, by what's going on in the marketplace, by customers feeding back what they're seeing from competitors. So, it's important to motivate the sales team and keep them focused on the value proposition, the strength of your position, and to keep them highly motivated. Presentation skills are critical as well to make sure that they're strong at listening to customer objections, responding well to them, and articulating the value proposition.
Do you think that is something that the sales manager is responsible for, or how much responsibility should be on the individual seller to maintain that?
Well, I do think it's three-pronged. In large organizations, the marketing team's got a massive responsibility in being clear on the offering and the offers, and assessing the competitive situation to make sure that things are competitive. Individual responsibilities always critical. It's interesting. In any market, someone's succeeding. The market might be tanking in general, but someone's going to be succeeding, and that comes down to personal attributes and willing to fight through the situation. And of course, the sales manager's got to be doing all he or she can do to make sure that the top performers are well motivated, and to bring along the people who aren't performing as well, and just see if they can turn them into top performers. In
coaching sales representatives and working with them, what do you feel is the best way to help a struggling seller to start improving?
I think it comes back to communication skills, first of all, to make sure that they're doing a wonderful job of speaking to customers, understanding their needs, and not trying to force a solution upon customers, and having a powerful method of communicating what the value proposition is. I'm very systematic in my approach, and for me, it comes down to a company well articulating the value proposition, and salespeople being able to articulate it well, adapting it to a particular customer's situation.
If I can dive deeper into that, I'm curious to learn more about your process. You said you're very meticulous. Do you mind walking us through that? If I was a sales rep working for your company, what would be the first thing I'd need to learn besides the value proposition? What would you teach me?
Well, we'd be looking at the competitive landscape, who the competitors are, how they position themselves, what are our ideal customer fits, who are the type of customers who buy from us, how to position to those various segments within the buying population, and then finally the discipline of ensuring that people do always ask for the sale. As I mentioned in the initial question you asked me about my sales experience, and I told you about the electronic sale, that young gentleman probably assessed me and didn't think it was a high probability of sale, but he had the discipline to ask for the sale. So that's how I approach these situations.
With the concept now of working with, entrepreneurs, working with small startups, because that's where you're spending some of your time as well, but your corporate experience. What would you say the biggest difference are when you're selling for a small mom and pop startup compared to selling for a corporate, large Fortune 500 company?
I think the large Fortune 500 companies, buyers understand there's a massive team behind them. And so they've got a lot of comfort that if something goes wrong, there's somebody to reach out to. There can be sales managers, customer service staff, et cetera, et cetera. With a smaller company, you need to establish credibility. So, you need to show that not only do you have a solution for an immediate need, but you need to illustrate in some fashion, what is the support structure in case something goes wrong. Customers just hate when they buy from one person and that person jumps jobs or gets removed. They want to see some depth of service.
It's so true with that. I've seen that to be, and I think it also loses the credibility in the company. If your turnover is really high, if you're going through salespeople, I mean, I'm just going to be like, something must be wrong there, or it's not going to help me to be able to want to build a relationship, because next thing you're going to know, in 6 months, I'm going to get somebody new and they're going to say, oh, I'm your new sales rep. It just doesn't foster trust, I would say. You
are absolutely right. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, it's I forgot the article I was reading, but it mentioned that too, and I was like, man, this is just so important, so key. But let's go down to if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm running by myself. I have no sales team. I'm out there hustling, trying to break through. What would be some of your recommendations? Besides having now we got our value proposition down, what can I do as a solopreneur to start finding tremendous success?
I think one of the things that's important at that stage is to have a view as to how you're going to grow as the revenue starts to flow. So what is the critical growth path? You need to understand when you're in the solo entrepreneur position, what is it that you love to do, and you shouldn't give that away, because you want to keep what keeps you motivated. So it may be the case that as you grow, you're going to need sales staff. Or you're going to need to invest in some professional marketing support, or you're going to need to invest in some customer service people or some technical support staff. So it's very important to have a vision of how you're going to grow and support the organization through the growth phases.
There is someone, Pat Flynn has an episode that I was listening to, and there's a lady on, and she was talking about that same idea, and it was almost like she did quote the E-Myth, like if you're growing and you're a solopreneur, figure out what are some of those things that you love to do, and you hold on to those, and hire people for stuff that you're not too good at, but so you can still have that passion, so you can still have that drive. As far as like the selling side go, I know sometimes we find entrepreneurs who are afraid of selling. They're the technical person, they're the developers, they came up with the baby, they came up with these really cool ideas, but they have a really hard time to pitch and to sell their product. What kind of advice would you give to somebody in that shoe to get out of that, I guess, that comfort zone?
Yeah. Well, what I'd recommend is develop a curiosity about your customers. Become skilled at asking questions. Don't worry about the pitch. People appreciate when you are showing care, compassion, interest in their problems. And I found throughout my career, very many aspects of my career, that people will very much open up about challenges they face. So if you are just honestly asking questions about, look, how do you approach this problem area? What are some of the challenges you're having? And you're just in an exploratory phase. You end up having a conversation like you and I are having now. And if there does turn out to be a fit for the product or service you're offering, then you can professionally offer it. And oftentimes it's not the slick pitch that wins. So I would suggest that people just become very skilled at asking questions, be curious about the customers, show care, interest, compassion, and even if you're not going to have a fit for what you're selling, you're going to learn an awful lot about your customers and perhaps have an opportunity to evolve your product and services.
And I feel that you just, especially with that portion, it definitely resonated a lot of truth to different things I've experienced. I had a guest on recently, and one of the things he talked about was how he turned down a deal with a customer, a prospect. He actually referred the prospect to his competitor because they weren't a right fit for each other. And if he was going to continue going with that, it wasn't going to work. And sometimes, just having the deep conversation with an individual, having an initial chat, I mean, like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be that strong sales pitch, just a conversation. And if you can express your value proposition, speak to their pain, and speak to how you can solve that, people would be goo goo gaga over what you're offering and desire to learn from you.
Absolutely. It's a great investment for the future.
Yeah, totally. It's in your as you went along through your sales experiences, and as you were managing, and as you transformed from the technical world into the sales side, what was the biggest obstacle that you faced? If there was any.
It's difficult. Yeah, it's difficult to think. But it's funny. I'll tell you a story. One of the sales successes I had when one of the biggest sales I ever landed when I moved into that area was a result of me recognizing that I just needed to get the right people talking to the right people, and I was selling to a group of engineers, and I had noted a previous salesperson who I was doing some mentoring with went in and made the slick pitch and gave lots of reasons why they should buy from us. And I recognized that wasn't successful, and that the engineers wanted to talk to very technical folks. So I brought in some of our engineers who I had talked to previously and understood why there was a good product fit where we were selling into. And it ended up that I set up a meeting. I said very little. The engineers talked to one another about electrical capacity and impedances. And at the end of the day, there was a major sale. So I think that comes down to customer analysis and understanding, how do you move the conversation forward in the long-term view of landing a sale. And depending on the organization and the product and service that you're pitching, the owner, the might not be the right person to be making the pitch.
Yeah, it was the idea of bringing in the technical folks is a key part. I remember when I used to do a lot of my software sales demonstrations and so forth, what I used to do is get the project managers to be a part of that. They could speak to the technical, stuff. And it also freed me up to be able to better analyze the situation, as you were saying, and they can speak tech to each other, and I can focus on my stuff. I don't have to be the know-it-all. And one of the cool things I saw was when I told people I just don't know. I don't know the answer. And I was able to, but I will promise I'll make sure I get it. And when I did that a lot of times and brought someone who could give that technical answer, they respected it. They're glad I didn't. I'm glad I don't try to make it up, because it doesn't do anything positive in the end, because the customer becomes distasteful because I may tell them whatever just to appease them. And that's not the way you're supposed to sell. All right. So Jim, we spoke a lot today about, marketing yourself, being able to understand your value proposition and so forth. But, just circling back to the very front as we get ready to wrap this, all up together. If you were to say what exactly a value proposition is for those who are listening, or a first-time entrepreneur, first-time sales professional, what is the value proposition, you would say? What is that built up of?
That's built upon someone's understanding of the market and the markets they serve. Understanding you should not be focusing on 100% of the target market. So you need to articulate, look, here's our core customers or types of customers, and it might be one set of attributes or three sets of attributes, and then you need to articulate why your product or service solves a specific problem for them. So it comes down to that quite simply, and it's quite a lot of work and discipline to articulate that simply. There's a lot of discipline in getting to that point, but that's what the value proposition is. Here's who we serve, here's the problems they have, here's why our solution saves them pain and grief, time and money.
Totally. Well, I've enjoyed our discussion today so far, Jim. But if there's one major takeaway you'd like listeners who are listening to this episode to walk away with, what would that one thing be?
Well, I think I'll bridge to my work with Toastmasters here because, it's one thing to sit down in isolation and develop these value propositions and think about how your product and service meets customer needs in isolation. But it's important that you talk about it to a large number of people. So it's important to network. Get out to business mixers, talk about what you do, watch the reaction. Hopefully their face isn't crinkling up and they're not getting your message. They're understanding what you do and what the proposition is, and listen to how they respond to it. When people are saying, "Oh, so this is what you do," there's important messages in that, and as they interpret what you're communicating and try to determine why anybody would spend money on your product and service. So I would suggest people get out and network. Business networking events, Toastmaster clubs are wonderful places to talk about a product or service, not in a hard pitch sense, but to find a general audience where you need to describe in simple general terms how you approach a market. But by talking about your solutions, that helps you better refine your value proposition and deliver to a wide group of people.
I have to agree with you on that 100%. There's so much that comes from that. So many different things. Sometimes I use my speeches and Toastmasters as an opportunity to work on in my sales presentations or elements of the sales presentation, or maybe a story that I'm going to use or something to that nature. So it's a great way, and people can really understand. When I first launched my podcast, a couple of my CC, people who are not in Toastmasters, there's a beginner's manual called Competent Communicator. And you go through the manual, different strategies on improving your speaking. And I would use podcasting or the Sales Evangelist as speech topics and did different things around it. So it helped to refine my message. So that's great. Yeah,
very good.
Love it.
Hey, it's important to be able to tailor your message to folks who are going to buy your product directly, or who may be influencers. In large organizations, you might be talking to accountants or financial professionals or customer service people or senior managers. So the more you practice delivering a message to a diverse audience, the better you get at it.
So true on that. Now, I want to make sure I respect your time today, Jim, and I know you're a busy individual, and I can probably ask about 17,000 more questions, maybe 16,000 more questions. But what are some of the current projects you're working on right now?
Well, right now I'm focused on my volunteer commitments. I've got a great volunteer job here with Toastmasters. It's not a full-time job, but it is quite demanding. So I serve as International President beginning in August for a one-year term. There's a great deal of travel as I serve as an internal ambassador for the organization, an external ambassador with some major companies around the world who bring Toastmasters into their organization. And I do work in chairing the board of directors. As I do that, I'm preparing for my exit from that volunteer role. So I'm looking at some other real estate investments. I'm looking to launch some startup opportunities and to become more fully engaged in the startup world. So I'm dabbling at that at this point as I refine my value proposition to build a prototype that will see if we get some traction in the marketplace.
That is awesome. Congratulations on that. And I'm excited for you.
Thank you, sir.
Now, if some of the listeners want to get connected with you because your value proposition was astounding, and they're like, I believe in him, I want to get connected with this guy, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
My email is Jim Kokocki, JimKokocki @gmail.com. I'm easily findable on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, so any of those mediums works very, very well.
Awesome. So what I'll do, I'll go ahead and make sure we link back in the show notes to that, so folks can get connected with you if they desire, and to learn more about you and follow your journey and to get some experience from things that you've experienced. So anyways, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, Jim.
Thank you, Donald.
Jim brought us some great information, some great knowledge, and you can find all the details, all of our show notes, everything back, links back to Jim and for some of the things that he's working on and to the Toastmaster International. You can find that all at salesevangelist.com. This is episode number 187. Again, the salesevangelist.com, episode number 187. Go ahead, check it out. Look forward to hearing from you. Look forward to having you connect with Jim and for you to be able to learn from him. And again, if you're interested in Toastmasters, highly recommend it. Great organization, great way to practice and to improve on your ability to articulate yourself and to be a better speaker. All in all, I do this because I want you to be successful. I want you to go out and do big things.